like a mass casualty terror attack occurs in America, and instantly we're back to business. I wanted to go back and talk about the FBI finding bomb-making supplies at the New Orleans truck attacker's home.
The FBI has uncovered more chilling evidence surrounding the New Orleans New Year's Day terror attacker. Investigators say they found bomb-making materials inside his Houston home and at an apartment in New Orleans. The ISIS-inspired U.S. Army veteran killed 14 people and injured more than 30 others. In the French Quarter yesterday, it was an emotional scene for loved ones. Police escorted the family of 21-year-old Yubi Gautreaux to a growing memorial on Bourbon Street. They walk hand in hand to stand at the spot where Gautreaux died. Omar Villafranca is in New Orleans. Omar, good morning.
Good morning. Memorials like this one behind me on Canal Street are lined with crosses and flowers to honor the victims. And the healing process is starting, but the investigation is well underway.
CBS News has confirmed that on Friday, investigators searched the Houston home of Samshuddin Jabbar and the New Orleans Airbnb he was renting before the deadly New Year's terror attack. Sources say bomb-making materials were found at both locations. The U.S. Army veteran sped down Bourbon Street, ramming his truck into a crowd, killing at least 14 rebellers, an attack authorities believe was inspired by ISIS. Those stunned by the horror include Jabbar's half-brother, who did not want to show his face.
Maybe he was going through something, that he just didn't tell anyone about.
Federal agencies have now put out a bulletin warning of possible copycat or retaliatory attacks. Now, New Orleans officials launched an investigation on what went wrong with security. A central focus now are on those bollards on Bourbon Street, designed specifically to thwart a vehicle from plowing through. On the morning of the attack, the bollards were down for repairs. New Orleans Police Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick.
A terrorist is hell-bent on destruction. And if it hadn't been on Bourbon, he was going to go...
This lady is so crazy. One of my favorite new characters that we have found out about. A lady who herself personally committed a similar act to what the New Orleans terrorists did only a couple months prior. Been passed around from agency to agency, police department to police department, due to her obvious incompetence, gets paid $340,000 a year by the state. She's been fired a bunch of times. It's amazing. It is amazing. Bro, just means she has experience? Yes, she ran people over. 2 people. One had to be hospitalized. In the month of August in 2024, she ran 2 people over. One of them had to be hospitalized, chatter. Fantastic. Subject matter expert.
Somewhere else.
But Bourbon Street is the heart of the French Quarter, and New Orleans did have a backup plan. These Archer barriers, also meant to stop a speeding vehicle from driving on the sidewalk. Kirkpatrick was asked why those barriers weren't put in place until after the attack.
I didn't know about them, but we have them, and so we have been able now to put them out.
The first funeral was on Friday for 18-year-old Kareem Badawi, who was a freshman at the University of Alabama. On the corner of Canal and Bourbon Street, there are 14 crosses and images honoring those who died. The growing tribute includes a wall where one mourner wrote, "We will never forget, terror didn't win." The resilience also extends to the dozens who were injured, including Jeremy Sensky. The 51-year-old Pennsylvania resident was in his wheelchair celebrating when the attack.
You're burying the lead. The superintendent was sober when she ran them over. Oh, yeah. She wasn't even drunk.
Attack happened.
He kept yelling for help, but he wasn't the worst injured. He was 5 feet from the truck. He was watching the shootout from the ground. We're just so grateful he's alive.
To be fair, she was fired for being a whistleblower in Oakland. You always get fired for being a cop whistleblower. No, she was fired because she said that the Oakland Police Department actually collaborated with federal law enforcement agencies in a sanctuary city in a sanctuary state. That's the reason why she got fired, because she was a hog and wanted to promote the bona fides of the Oakland Police Department at a time when obviously the Democratic leadership would have considered that to be completely unacceptable and in direct violation of certain sanctuary city restrictions given. Also, she didn't really get fired anyway. She just got relocated. And also, Then the city had to pay her $1.5 million because that's how strong police unions and their legal teams are. It is really funny though when they're like, yeah, she presented herself as a whistleblower. Now, let's get back to
the new FBI.
Let's get back to the New Orleans terror attack.
FBI warning this morning following the deadly rampage in New Orleans early New Year's Day. ABC's Christian Cordero joins us now from New Orleans with the latest. Good morning, Christian.
Gio, good morning. The reopening of Bourbon Street and the Sugar Bowl are both examples that this community is trying to get back to normal. But there is still a tension in the air and a lot of unanswered questions. This morning, investigators are combing through the physical and digital footprints of Shamsuddin Jabbar, the man suspected of killing 14 people in New Orleans' French Quarter on New Year's Day. His half-brother Abdur tells ABC News Jabbar traveled to Egypt for about a month in 2023. These are some of the items his brother says he brought back: jewelry, tea, and other gifts. Sources tell ABC News investigators are looking into whether the trip has anything to do.
It seems like he just went on a trip. Are there even like dormant ISIS cells in like Egypt? What?
With his radicalization.
What I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS.
On Friday in New Orleans, the ATF returned to the house that Jabbar rented ahead of the attack, concluding he tried to set a small fire in the hallway in his effort to destroy it and other evidence of his crime. But officials said evidence has been recovered, including bomb-making material. Investigators say that the unexploded IEDs recovered from 2 coolers in the French Quarter were made with a very rare explosive compound that also contained a remote detonation capability. The FBI now warning every law enforcement agency in the country of potential copycat attacks. As the FBI sifts through the evidence and interviews witnesses, we're learning more about the survivors. 22-year-old Brandon Whitsitt was out celebrating New Year's Eve with friends when he saw the white truck swerving towards him.
I ain't know doing it on purpose.
His family hasn't left his side.
We didn't know what the status was. We didn't know how far everything was.
The former football player tells us he hasn't tried walking yet, but vows to get back on his feet step by step.
I know it's going to take a minute to get back to where I was.
As the French Quarter inches back to normalcy, flowers, candles, and crosses line the entrance to Bourbon Street, where people pause to reflect on the victims, including 21-year-old Hubert Guthreau. His family visiting this memorial, telling ABC News he was someone who loved deeply, gave generously, and brought joy to everyone who knew him. President Biden says he has spoken with the families of the victims. He and the First Lady are scheduled to visit New Orleans on Monday. Guys?
So much heartache, Christian. Thank you so much. And Whit, I know that you spent the past week basically there in New Orleans. You spoke with these survivors, these relatives of the victims as well. I mean, what were they telling you? How are they moving on?
Yeah, Gio, I got to say, this is the first mass casualty event I've ever covered where the crime scene was cleaned up and reopened within 36 hours.
Wow.
I find this really weird. The way that we're covering this, there's so much weirdness with the way that we're covering it. It's like, yeah, we immediately cleaned it up and we could just use, like, Bourbon Street was back on its feet immediately. And it's like, I get what they're trying to say. They're trying to say that, like, New Orleans is not going to be intimidated by terrorists. And I understand that aspect of it, but also it kind of shows how desensitized we are to ultra violence. You know what I mean? Like, where we're just immediately back. Like, a mass casualty terror attack occurs in America and instantly we're back to business. And we're also talking about how quickly we went back to business. To me, it feels like we have become increasingly more desensitized, and it's become so normal that this kind of violence will happen. And I don't know, as a person from and lives in Nola, majority of the community is upset that they reopened Bourbon. We think it's disgusting. I don't know why they're taking the spice must flow attitude, commerce must continue. It immediately reminded me of the post 9/11 George W. Bush statement of the most patriotic thing that an American can do in this moment is to go back to work and go watch movies and go purchase commodities. That was the take. George W. Bush presented shopping as patriotism in the aftermath of 9/11. I think partially, though, the reason why people immediately went back to normalcy, some semblance of normalcy, is part to reassert the patriotic sentiments of, this can't break us, to like show the world like we can overcome this. But I think the other part, and perhaps the scarier part of this, the scariest aspect of this, at least from my analysis, is that we just don't care anymore. We don't care when 10 people are slaughtered, when 14 people are slaughtered. We just genuinely are like, yep, that's another day. Like the worth of an individual life, unless they're a CEO, make no mistake, if they're a CEO and there was a deliberate targeted attack against the CEO, then we got to shut down the city. Okay, we got to shut the city down. We got to shut the bridges down. All hands on deck. If it's like 14 individual lives, common folk, regular folk, then business as usual, baby. Let's go. Yeah, here's Bush.
As we work with Congress in the coming year to chart a new course in Iraq and strengthen our military to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we must also work together to achieve important goals for the American people here at home. This work begins with keeping our economy growing. And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
I feel like the state of normalcy is critical to ensuring that masses are sedated to the fact that we are always at war now. Yeah, go shopping. I'm George W. Bush. I'm George W.B. Go shopping more. I get what you mean, but one case had an active manhunt where the suspect was killed on scene, right? Sure. I guess that's also true. It's not like commerce kept flowing after Brian Thompson's assassination as well. I was thinking more so the broad media reception, where on the one hand, people didn't really care about, like the average citizens did not care about Brian Thompson's assassination and kept living their daily lives and maybe even celebrated it. Whereas on the other hand, it seems like the media was so critical of that. Whereas in this circumstance, they're presenting it as a positive that look how fantastic it is that business as usual is back after this horrific crime. Like there was CNN coverage specifically dedicated to how Americans were just living their lives daily as a CEO. An innocent CEO was assassinated in broad daylight. Remember Michael Merconish on CNN? He did not one, but two individual pieces on that, upset that there wasn't even a vigil presented for Brian Thompson.
And people in New Orleans, the families, the people I spoke with, this is part of the toughness and resilience of that city there. We heard jazz music playing on Bourbon Street a day later. They are mourning the lives lost, but they are also celebrating the lives that they lived. Yeah. And this is a big part of the spirit and the culture of New Orleans. So I think for an outsider, I was taken aback a little bit at first at how quickly the atmosphere changed. Yeah. But for the people who live there, it was very important that they don't let terror prevent them from living.
Okay, all right. So there's more to the story that I want to engage with. Number one, NBC News reporting that the federal investigators are examining the New Orleans attack say that Jabbar used a very rare explosive compound in 2 devices. Authorities are investigating how Jabbar acquired the knowledge to create this homemade explosive. The explosive has never been used in a U.S. terror attack or incident, nor in any European terror attack. A key question for investigators is how Jabbar learned about the compound and how he managed to produce it. So that's also unique. The explosive has never been used in a U.S. terrorist attack incident, nor a European one. Neither of the homemade devices exploded, and it remains unclear whether the failure was due to malfunction, lack of activation, or another issue. Jabbar planned to use a transmitter to detonate the 2 bombs, which were placed in coolers, the authorities said. The FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives said in a joint statement Friday that the 2 explosive devices were placed on Bourbon Street, which Jabbar later returned into a scene of devastation. The transmitter and the 2 guns were recovered from Jabbar's truck, the statement said, and are being transported to an FBI laboratory for testing. Jabbar had also set fire to a short-term rental house on Mandeville Street in New Orleans where bomb-making materials were found, Friday's joint statement added, in his effort to destroy it and other evidence of his crime. I think a lot of people are hyper-focusing on the other vet, Matthew Livesberger, as like a unique and fascinating incident because he was a special forces guy. But I think this one is significantly more interesting from the point of like potential conspiracies. How does a guy who is otherwise normal, also an American military veteran, who did HR work and IT work for the American military, who was also a real estate guy, how does a guy like that turn around and get radicalized, say he's ISIS, and even go so far as to create a chemical concoction that has yet to be used on U.S. or European soil as a improvised explosive device? The point A to point B story that you can tell about Matthew Leibesberger is a fairly common experience shared by a lot of American veterans. Okay, guy who loses his mind after divorces and also, you know, has a hard time dealing with PTSD, things of that nature, and then ends up going out in a spectacular fashion, but ends up killing himself, is a very common story. For Jabbar, there's a lot of parts of the story that are there's a lot of different components of the story that are just like, they just don't make a whole lot of sense. This does not seem like a conspiratorial thing at all. I mean, financial problems and also having issues with like family issues and feeling isolated create a unique opportunity for the likes of someone like Jabbar to be targeted by ISIS, but ISIS isn't exactly doing this sort of stuff, with the exception of please stop veering right. There's no conspiracy. It's mental health and spousal issues. I don't think saying that the American government, specifically the FBI, sometimes will target mentally ill people to apprehend them before they're done with their crimes in an effort to throw numbers on the board. That's not, especially in cases where Islamic style terrorism is involved. This is something that the FBI has done quite a bit. They've done similar things with white nationalist groups as well, but this is the FBI MO. This is not about veering right at all. But it doesn't make sense that it's ISIS is what I'm saying, because like I said this yesterday and I said this before as well. If this was a quote unquote psyop or something, it would make infinitely more sense for whichever government agency to claim that this was actually someone who was activated by Hezbollah or activated by Iran or activated by Hamas. While there's no actual pattern of this sort of Western attack committed at the behest of either of those groups, it's still, you know, if you want to make a statement, and if you want to I don't know, ignite public fervor against any number of different foreign adversaries, you wouldn't use ISIS, which, especially at a time when they're basically like they're gone, right? So I still land on the side of like most likely a guy with family issues, financial problems, who just snapped and then somewhere along the lines went with ISIS because that's what he knew, you know, and was like, oh yeah, I'm ISIS. Actually, I've decided, instead of killing my family, according to him and according to FBI reports, was he landed on ISIS instead of killing his family. That's what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's simply what the reporting is. I'm looking at like every possible avenue. To try to figure out what could be the reason. Yeah. Also, the same chat saying Luigi Mangioni's a patsy is saying this is a bridge too far is pretty funny. I know. What's your central claim against the claim that the FBI is making? Well, I'm not making a claim against what the claim FBI is making. The FBI hasn't really made like a coherent claim thus far. They haven't really like put together a thorough analysis on this issue. They just say he was ISIS. He wasn't ISIS affiliated, but most likely ISIS inspired. So there isn't really a fully flushed out claim either. Now, that hasn't stopped opportunists like this lady from the New York Post from taking advantage of this, just like the Fox News coverage that we watched, where they immediately turned around and were like, You know what Jabbar did is exactly the same as what queer English majors did in Columbia campus when they said Israel is an apartheid state, which is objectively true. So there were, of course, opportunists in the media that turned around and were like, Jabbar is just like Columbia campus protesters. They did do that because they're opportunists and charlatans. Here is what the New York Post lady did. Apparently getting access into the crime scene.
Terrace home. You can see that it's been clearly destroyed. The door.
Wasn't there an ISIS attack on Russia last year? It could have been the same situation where ISIS just approached an individual. My friend, that was an incredibly sophisticated military operation against an American foreign adversary. Targets that ISIS routinely targets, as a matter of fact. Very different circumstances. You think that ISIS just simply activated a bunch of sleeper cells in Russia? No, that was a massive military operation. So that's number one. Or the one in Iran, or any number of different areas of operation, with the exception of Israel. Yeah, just like the attack that took place on the drone factory in Turkey. Let's continue.
Released from the FBI raid yesterday, but if we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. He had this work area here, lots of different chemicals splayed around, and different.
Like this is a really weird piece of news coverage, I'll say. It's very odd that she's just like allowed to walk in and film the explosive materials that are just like laying in wait.
Electronics. This is again a work setup. Left receipts, just very unkempt in here. If we go over here, actually, you can see the Department of Justice documents here, the search warrant, and the property that they recorded here, which seems to be a lot of chemicals. Again, just left in disarray. There's a bedroom back here, and what appears to be his collection of religious materials, his Qurans, an open Quran with a passage there, as well as even the Bible here, but mostly books on Islam, and his prayer rug just to the left of me here. And if we go back, there's another bedroom here. You can see he left all these belongings, contact lenses, personal belongings.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but I wonder what the passage is. He had a Quran permanently open to a passage about martyrdom, and a journalist is allowed to tour and film what you would assume is an investigative crime scene. Oh, and you're showing off the ingredients for bomb making. Sure, cool. This is all very normal. It's not. It's not. It's giving Hasbara. Okay? Sorry. This is the most IDF coded thing I've ever seen. This is exactly how the IDF operates. Not saying that she's the IDF, simply stating that usually we know what this kind of coverage looks like. It usually comes in the aftermath of some kind of attack that Israel engaged in an effort to defend said attacks. Like, oh, we killed like a bunch of babies, and here's why we had to do that.
Bathroom. This seems to be some sort of workspace, again, with other chemicals here. The light's still on. Some kind of station set up here. We're not really sure what that was for. In, what we can assume was also a bedroom. You can see clothes left here. And just...
Even right-wingers don't buy it. 2 U.S. military veterans rented cars from the same company on the same day to commit ISIS-style terrorist attacks 2,000 miles apart, and I'm supposed to be upset with Iran. What is happening? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this guy's a right-winger or not, but, I don't think that there is a significant connection between the two veterans. Look at the last frame you just paused on. Hold on. Oh, well, there it is.
A sign that...
Wait, hold on.
I'm not really sure what that was for. In, what we can assume was also a bedroom. You can see clothes left here, and just a sign that someone was here up until those last few moments when neighbors said he left just before the New Year's holiday, saying he was done with his lease, it was up, and he was on his way to New Orleans where he would live there. Didn't take any furniture because he said his new home would be furnished.
That was that is a kafia, which they seemingly spent some time on. The
There's
camera
also a
did.
bedroom. You can see clothes left here, and just a sign that someone was here up until those last few moments when neighbors said he left just before the New Year's holiday, saying he was done with his lease. It was
No, I don't think it's a Palestinian kafia, but it's kafia enough. Okay, it's enough. It's in the region. Now, somebody, People's City Council actually looked at the beat of this reporter, Jenny Taher, on Israel's wall under siege, the terror threat at the U.S. border, and the collapse of sanctuary cities. 3 Palestinian terror suspects caught after crossing border illegally as overwhelmed agents warn, I probably let terrorists in. Illegal migrant from Lebanon caught at border admitted he's a Hezbollah terrorist hoping to make a bomb and was headed for New York, all by Jenny Taher. Jenny Taher, we're prepared. Americans serving in the Israeli military readying for the possibility of a Gaza ground invasion, for the Daily Caller. Worked at Prager Force from 2017 to 2018. Production intern for the Laura Ingraham Show. Look at that. Oh, she worked for Camera. Okay, well, that's okay. That's it. For those of you who don't know, Camera is, I believe they also get grants from the Knesset, if I'm not mistaken, but it's Committee for Accuracy in the Middle East Reporting in America. It's another one of these media fairness organizations that specifically works on, I mean, she wrote it in her LinkedIn, promoted Israel at University of Arizona through social media and campus events. Why would the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting promote Israel? What? According to her own admission, on her own LinkedIn, on her own CV. Apparently, this guy's door was left open for days and people were inside the home taking pictures and freely roaming around. He was with 2 other people, and then he wasn't. Where did the ISIS flag come from? Not even conspiratorial, but cops lie all the time and the media happily publishes those lies without any initial fact checking. Weird. Multiple sources of the NOPD viewed footage of multiple suspects loading explosives into the vehicle. Althea Duncan, New Orleans FBI field office, said that Jabbar did not act alone. Hours later, Christopher Raya from the FBI's counterterrorism division said the opposite. What's insane is that they seem to have determined with insane speed and certainty that no one was in the vicinity to help him do anything and that there is no additional threat to the public. Deputies closed down the street in North Harris County where Shamsuddin Jabbar was living. A source tells me the HCSO bomb squad was on the way to collect evidence. This comes days later when the door was left open and people were inside the home taking pictures and freely roaming around. Sources also say precursor chemicals were found inside the home when they first raided it, which are typically used for making homemade explosives. The question now becomes, why come back and collect evidence and not do this days ago? Is there other times when the FBI radicalized normal Americans? Not normal Americans, but yes, of course. The FBI has absolutely worked to entrap and honeypot, oftentimes mentally disabled Americans, like Muslim teenagers and stuff like that. But also even white supremacist militias too. Adults as well. But like I said, regardless of the weird nature of some of the information that's come out of this and some of the backtracking that's also come subsequently after the initial coverage, this part is just like so clearly cut for propaganda. One must ask the question why this person has this level of access as they've like staged all this stuff. And she's like, look at the bomb making material and look at the Quran.
And he was on his way to New Orleans where he would live there. Didn't take any furniture because he said his new home would be furnished. That's all we know so far.